It is well known that, save for a few places around the world, it's far cheaper to run an electric car than it is to run a gasoline or diesel vehicle. And there's a very good reason for that. Even using a very conservative estimate, EVs turn around 77% of the energy stored in their battery pack into motive force to move along, whereas gasoline and diesel vehicles use at best 30% of the stored energy and at worst closer to 12%. Servicing costs are lower for EVs too. Forget those regular trips to the dealership for an oil change, new filter and complimentary lube job. Or for those who are more mechanically minded, a few hours every few months laying on your back on a cold driveway while you curse and swear because you've misplaced your oil drain pan and you've now got slightly warm, dirty oil splashing onto your face. Aside from the occasional tyre rotation and check to make sure the suspension, steering and brake systems are doing exactly what they should, and the even more occasional fluid swap or super rare transmission oil change, the EVs cost a lot less to maintain. And then there's the whole problem of energy pricing changes. Unlike gasoline, whose key ingredient, crude oil, can pass its massively fluctuating price onto customers at the pump multiple times a day, electricity pricing tends to be more stable, at least for the end consumer. For the most part, electricity is less susceptible to sudden changes in pricing, partly because of how the electrical grid is regulated. But, well, I don't know about you, but in the last few years, the cost of electricity has soared in many markets around the world, and while it's still far cheaper to own and operate an EV than it is a gasoline or diesel-powered vehicle, the cost to charge an EV is starting to tick up. So today I'm going to examine some of the ways in which you can counter that all by taking advantage of some simple hacks that will let you charge your EV for less. And no, I'm not talking about snaking your granny lead across your neighbour's driveway to charge off that hidden socket at the base of their cherry tree that they use every holiday season to run the kind of light show that draws people from the next county.
Incredible, Dad.
Despite what some would like you to believe, things are getting more expensive. From your weekly grocery shop.
It's such an old-fashioned term, but a beautiful term, groceries. It sort of says a bag with different things in it.
Through to the amount of money you're paying for a takeout, things are far more expensive now than they've been for a really long time. And it's a global problem. The reasons for this all aren't really massively important for this particular video. It's a combination of market instability, politics, and a world that still in some places is trying to recover from the longer-term effects of COVID-19. And then there are things like increased extreme weather events, from droughts and fires to floods, all of which have the ability to dramatically affect a nation's ability to grow and sustain food for its citizens. And let's not forget avian flu either, something that's still affecting the prices of eggs around the world. And while I know some will say, but egg prices are falling, because you've been told that, I don't yet see evidence when I visit my local store. Sure, to be frank, I don't buy eggs anyway because I have 4 very competent egg machines on retention at my house. But the last time I looked, I saw prices of between $7 and $10 a dozen. And not while you might not think this has anything to do with EVs, it's kind of does, because the more money you spend on just being able to exist, the less money you have for other things. And unfortunately, I do not know a single person right now who has more money than they used to. Except maybe those who already had scads of it to begin with. If you have a relatively small commute and you do most of your EV charging at home, you may not have noticed a massive rise in the cost of charging your EV, especially if you live somewhere where there's a robust, well-maintained electrical grid, or you happen to already have photovoltaic solar panels at home that are fully paid off. But I'm going to hazard a guess that most people aren't in either of those groups. And if you do charge at home in an area where you don't have solar panels and your local utility has put prices up substantially in recent years, or you happen to need to rely exclusively on public charging, the chances are that you have noticed the price of filling up your EV has started to soar. And if that sounds familiar, then this video is for you. Today, I'm going to list the ways you can charge your EV for less, both at public charging stations and also at home, and give you some ways in which, if the stars align, you might even be able to charge for free. Let's start with public charging. I think it goes without saying that the price you pay for public charging will depend on a multitude of different factors. The price is obviously impacted by demand. The more in-demand charging stations are, the more likely it is that a charging company will hike up the price to reap the rewards. But it's also impacted by competition. If you live somewhere where there's a monopoly or near monopoly on public EV charging, you might find that pricing is pretty tightly controlled, with one or two firms setting the de facto rate for the region. But what you might not know is that how much you pay might not just be a factor of how much the CEO of the charging company wants their new super yacht. It can also be impacted by external factors. And these external factors can vary quite dramatically. They can include things like any additional fees or percentage profit skimming done by the host location. They can be affected by the need for a new startup EV charging firm to recoup some kind of return on investment for early angel investors, or perhaps a need to pay back loans, or a need to reach profitability before any of its grants it's been awarded to establish the network run out, or it has its IPO. But depending on your area, the cost can also be influenced by local law. See, while most places around the world now allow EV charging companies to bill customers per kilowatt hour, some places prohibit the selling of electricity per kilowatt hour for any company not officially registered as a utility company. And the process of becoming a utility company and satisfying regulatory requirements is, frankly, often far beyond what a charging provider can manage. And so, in places where those kinds of rules exist, charging providers have to charge per minute of access time rather than the actual amount of electricity you put in your car. And that can significantly impact how a company prices access to its network and its charging stations. Then there are costs associated with paying for the installation and maintenance of a site, all of which have to be rolled into a charging network's fee structure for return on investment. And in many parts of the world, unlike domestic customers who usually pay a set fee for every kilowatt hour of electricity they use, commercial customers not only have to pay for the electricity they use, but how quickly they use it. In the US, this is traditionally called demand charging and is levied against companies that experience massive fluctuations in their electrical consumption. And here is where it can get interesting, because demand charging can be a little counterintuitive. See, if a local utility company knows that a customer will pull power from the grid at a predictable level, that customer's electricity bill can often be less than a commercial customer down the street who uses less actual energy overall every month, but pulls that power in from the grid in unpredictable bursts. And unfortunately, many charging providers fit into that latter category, especially for less popular charging sites in more rural areas. That in turn means the costs to the end customer tend to go up, at least if the network doesn't spread that cost out across all charging stations, which some, but not all, charging networks do. I've discussed some of the challenges that cause public charging station prices to fluctuate, but I've not yet talked about how you can find cheaper charging, so let's get to that now. First, you need to do your homework. While it can be a pain, the price you pay to charge up can vary from location to location and from network to network, just as different gas stations, sometimes just across the road from one another, often display different prices for filling up. I don't believe there is yet a price comparison tool for EV charging stations, but most of the route planning and EV charging database tools that do exist display charger pricing if it's publicly available. And of course, most charging networks advertise the cost to charge on their smartphone app or website. And if you've got a fancy schmancy EV with online telematics and doodads and OTA capabilities, you may even have a built-in route planner in your infotainment system that can help you locate and figure out pricing for your nearby charging stations. For the biggest savings and the cheapest charging rates, though, there are 3 big hacks you need to know about: time of use and rush pricing policies, membership pricing, and sponsored charging locations. Just like some utility companies offer customers heavily discounted electricity through time-of-use programs designed to encourage you to use more electricity when it's plentiful or cheap to produce, and simultaneously discourage you from using electricity when it's in high demand or more expensive to produce, some charging networks employ time-based charging policies. These include time-of-use discounts that give you cheaper electricity during off-peak demand periods, as well as what's known as rush pricing, when the cost to charge can be pushed up during heavy demand periods. Not all locations employ this kind of policy, and some networks only apply these policies at sites where demand is unusually high during massive peak demand periods. Most major networks now employ this kind of pricing policy at least somewhere on their network, and the differences in pricing can be quite noticeable, especially if you have an electric vehicle with a very large battery pack. While it might not seem like the difference will be that big between paying, say, 40 cents per kilowatt hour and 45 cents per kilowatt hour if you only need 10 kilowatt hours in your car, a price increase of just 50 cents, if you need to put 90 kilowatt hours of energy into your EV's battery pack, it can be quite noticeable, especially if you make long distance trips or you have to rely exclusively on public charging. And while it's far less common than adjustable pricing designed to get you charging during off-peak periods, we are now starting to see those networks adding additional fees during peak demand periods for special holidays, like around Christmas. Some networks do this more than others, and frankly, I don't like it, because I think it takes advantage of EV owners in a way that can actually discourage EV ownership entirely. That said, it should also be noted that some charging networks do, to their credit, sometimes either discount or completely remove the cost to charge during natural disasters, where the primary goal of anyone is to get somewhere safe, not figure out if they're going to get a good deal on charging, or in fact, afford the charging session. Tesla is most well known for doing this, and whatever my personal animus towards the hateful things the guy in charge at that company has said and done in recent years, I have to say, well done to Tesla for that particular policy. Time of use charging out of the way, let's look at membership pricing. There are different ways you can sign up for this, and depending on where you are, they will be slightly different. But these days, they usually require you to sign up with a credit card for a monthly fat fee that then grants you discounted rates on charging compared to non-network members. Some networks these days work together to offer discounted roaming to other networks in your region, and others just give you access to their network. How much you'll be able to save on charging does vary from network to network and the plan you've chosen, which can vary from country to country. In some places, membership pricing is limited to a specific amount of energy every month, with pricing going up for larger amounts used. In other places, you'll find it's possible to pay your membership fee from just the savings you get using member pricing on one moderately long road trip. Sometimes this is all tied to a smartphone app or RFID card, and sometimes it's just directly tied to your vehicle, especially have an EV with plug and charge. But the most important thing here is that in exchange for some time on your part and maybe being monitored by the network for your use, you can get significantly discounted EV fast charge rates. It's also worth noting that some automakers offer discounted or even free charging for new customers to cover the first few months or years of ownership or a specific number of kilowatt hours of energy. Others offer discounted charging for customers through their own in-car charging company programs. But, and this is super important, it is not always the case. In fact, for me, as a Ford F-150 Lightning owner, it is still cheaper for me to have an Electrify America subscription on my smartphone and use the EA app on my phone to initiate charging my truck at a fast charging station than it is for me to use the Ford charging app and plug and charge built into my truck. I have both set up because sometimes the charging station only wants to operate using plug and charge, but the difference in fees can be as much as $5 or $10 if my truck is particularly low on charge. I also want to throw in here that it's very often the more out-of-the-way charging stations where you can actually get the best deal for both level 2 and DC fast charging costs and speeds. It's rare, but you can sometimes even find free vend stations in bizarre locations where the local cell phone signal isn't the best. It's rare, but it happens sometimes, very often attached to a renewable energy generation site in the back of beyond.
We are sitting on a field of victory. The salted pork is particularly good.
Finally, for finding cheaper charging in public, let's look at discounted and sponsored charging provided by a particular venue. While most charging networks own their charging stations and then pay ground rent, there are some charging companies that operate differently, allowing sites to add on additional fees or indeed underwrite the cost of charging, or own the charging station outright and then pay them a maintenance fee. This can lead to both free and super low-cost public charging sites that are often out of the way or not known about, unless you just happen to stumble across the right listing somewhere. For example, there is a charging station in Scappoose, Oregon that is located right next to a Tesla supercharger site. It's so affordable and heavily discounted that Tesla owners regularly turn up with a CCS adapter and charge at the super cheap ChargePoint charging station rather than pay an order of magnitude more to use the faster, more powerful Tesla units. Common sites for heavily discounted charging include car dealerships with charging stations located outside of the lot, which means you can use them at night, as well as public charging locations on local government property, usually discounted to help encourage people to drive electric. Also, you'll find that stations located at independent or local stores with a reputation for being environmentally friendly are often also much cheaper. Public charging out of the way, let's look at saving money at home. And if you happen to live in an area where your local utility has put prices up and up again, there are some substantial savings to be made, but it really does depend on your personal circumstances. Because if you make the wrong choice, you might find that things that you thought would save you money actually end up costing you more. Before I get into this, I want to acknowledge that price hikes are real and they are very painful. I just got a $400 electricity bill for last month. A month where we actually exported a significant amount of electricity to the grid and met a significant amount of our needs from on-roof generation during the day. I checked, and our energy consumption hasn't really changed much in the last 4 years, but our local utility has put its prices up so many times that the cost has ballooned from about $100 for this month to nearly $400. And before naysayers speak it's not because of renewables. It's because of the fact that our local utility companies, there are several in our area, realised after 2019's fires that many hundreds of thousands of miles of power lines in the Pacific Northwest are dangerously close to trees and thus spent an inordinate amount of money paying a literal army's worth of arborists to cut down and trim trees that would otherwise be fire risks in our increasingly hot and dry Pacific Northwest summers. Yes, I wish the costs weren't so high, and it's not cool they've been going up, but the price hikes aren't primarily because of renewables. Okay, so home charging. Obviously, the least tech-savvy way to get cheaper charging at home, and I'm going to avoid the obvious one of having photovoltaic solar panels, is to sign up for a time of use or TOU program. Most, but not all utility companies offer them, and they trade heavily discounted electricity during off-peak periods for much higher cost electricity in peak periods. Now, if you work away from home and are only at home primarily during the weekends and evenings, this is a fantastic product because it allows you to charge your car up at night time for substantially reduced rates. Sometimes the differences in cost can be a fraction of what you'd pay on a single rate tariff. It's also great if you have appliances that can be set to operate at night time, such as a washer, dryer, or dishwasher. In the UK, this kind of tariff was known as Economy 7 when I was growing up, and because we lived in a house with electric storage heaters that used resistive heat at night time to warm up a massive concrete block, which then released its heat slowly during the day, I remember it saving my parents a lot of money. However, a tariff like this would certainly not work for me now because I work from home and our electricity consumption is actually higher during the day than it is at night. I mean, to be fair, my electricity consumption runs high all of the time because of the Transport Evolved Studio servers and charging people's cars up, but using a time of use system right now would not quite bankrupt me. It also happens to be impossible where I live to have a time of use rate while also being signed up for the solar feed-in tariff program, which of course I am signed up for. Another option for some folks, though, are utility-operated smart charging programs. These operate in one of two different ways. They either connect to your car's telematics system to tell it when to start or stop charging, or they connect directly to a smart-enabled charging station at your home that allows the utility to do the same thing. Believe it or not, even quite old electric cars may have this basic functionality if they have telematics. Kate's 2019 Kia Niro EV has this feature, and her local utility is compatible with her car. Neither her Autel EVSE nor her Open EVSE are currently compatible with the system her local utility operates, so she signed up to use the automated telematics system to allow her car to be restricted during peak periods unless she overrides it, and in return she gets paid some extra credits for helping the grid out. While many charging stations that follow the OCPP standard can be used to remotely start and stop charging, utilities can be pretty finicky about which ones they will actually support, so your individual results will vary. Reach out to your local utility before buying a smart charging station. The way this works is that your local utility keeps an eye on grid demand, and if it's too high and the utility is worried about not being able to meet demand using usual generation methods, it will basically ping a message to either your car or your charging station and ask it to either slow or stop charging completely. You're then able to override this, so if you need to be charged to head out to that fancy dinner you booked 2 months ago, you and your date won't be left stranded. But if you don't need your car until 8 a.m. the next morning, letting your utility company remotely stop charging for a few hours to make sure that it has extra excess energy is not only going to help it not spin up a heavily polluting, costly peaker power plant, but it can earn you a little money or discounted charging too. And this system is also used to help offset excess generation. If it's a really sunny day or a really windy day, or perhaps both, and your area is producing more renewable energy than it can consume, these kind of smart charging systems can do the opposite, sending excess power to available EVs that are plugged in and ready to accept charge. In the UK, for example, some utility companies even offer free charging when this happens, meaning your charging costs can basically fall to zero. In some circumstances, utilities will even pay customers to use electricity by encouraging them to shift their consumption to off-peak demand, high generation parts of the day. Other companies offer customers unlimited charging for a flat fee every month, as long as the utility can control exactly when and how charging takes place. And I should point out here that people often conflate this smart charging concept with V2G. But V2G, vehicle to grid, is a two-way thing which allows your vehicle to feed power back to the grid or pull power from it, earning you money in the process. What smart charging is literally allowing your utility company to control when your car charges, saving it from having to turn on additional generation, and thus saving massive amounts of money and, frankly, carbon dioxide. Your discounted charging rates, or rebates, are your reward. Unfortunately, though, that kind of charging works best if you have a predictable schedule, you have a predictable commute, and you know when or not you'll need to use your car. If you are someone with a tight schedule whose car isn't always around, or you rarely come home with anything approaching a decent amount of charge, it might be harder to make use of this kind of program. So there you go. Ways to save money on your EV charging as electric charging prices soar. Next up, writing to your congressperson to ask why all those big AI firms, which are also causing a massive increase in demand and thus grid pricing, aren't being asked to do more to expand your local grid and ensure their consumption is 100% renewables. But, that's for another video, I think. Thanks for joining us today, and if you've got thoughts, make sure you leave them in our Discord chat room, on our Patreon page down below, or you can reach out to us on Mastodon or Blue Sky. Thanks to the amazing list of people scrolling by on your screen right now. They're part of the massive community of supporters who make this channel possible, helping us through Patreon and YouTube, covering our bills, paying our team, and helping us to remain 100% independent. If you'd like to join them and see your name listed here, just follow the links below. We've got options available across a wide range of different price points, starting from just $1.50 US a month. A massive welcome to our newest supporters: Bass, Mind Sturmer, Dan Morton, DX Watt, There's Jer, Magnetar Employer, Ron THX1138, Jonas V, John Leonard, Joe Weekend Dog Dad, Ayalfini, David Hardin, Enzoticus, Ed Runyon, Beth S, Mitch Rassner, Brad Crusshorn, Leighton, Dennis, Stephen Beetle, Albert Beatty, Peterson, Ja, Todd Fraser, Rick B, Paul, Andrew Deet, Tim Benford, John Salmons, Sag Gibson, JTPDX, Tyler Walker, Gary Dean Mercer Clark, Roboman410, and John Galley. To join the list and get your shout out, become a paid Patreon member for your moment of fame, and you can even give membership to someone else. If you'd like to support us with a one-off donation, you'll find links below to make Ko-fi and Bitcoin donations, and we even have an old-fashioned PO box that you can reach us at the time being, address also below. You'll also find links to our swag store, and if you are someone who has to shop on Amazon, please consider using our affiliate link so we get the commission, not Jeff Bezos. So we can continue to focus on making our content even better and reduce creator burnout. We're being a little freer with our release days this year, but plan on dropping new content every Tuesday, Thursday and Saturday on our main channel, plus something on Sunday over on Transport Evolved Take 2. If you want more, the algorithm that hates us thinks you should watch this video, but this one is one of our favourites. Be awesome, be kind, be intentional, and don't forget to resist. Keep evolving.